Hello and welcome back to another tutorial by Creative Angelic Images, and today we will be working in Affinity Photo and walking through a complete edit of a macro shot with a flower. As you can see, when we look at our image in Affinity Photo, we have a major color shift and tonal problem with this image. The image, yes, is of a dandelion. However, we have a lot of yellow going on, and when you look into the top right-hand corner of the histogram, we can see that our RGB channels are all over the place. So today we are going to focus on how we can edit and deal with an image that we had shot that creates this color shift. As you bring your photo into Affinity Photo, we would like to make a copy of the background layer. We go to Layer and Duplicate Selection. Now we are able to go into the Adjustments tab, and we are going to first start out with our Curves Adjustment layer. As you can see, we can click on the tab and not just deal with the master like we normally do for highlights and shadows, but we can go into the individual RGB channels. Remember, anything to the right deals with your highlights, anything to the left deals with your shadows. So for our curves adjustment layer, we can see a color shift, so we want to take our green channel and bump it over a little bit more from the right to the left, and we are also going to do that to our blue channel. As we can see with our histogram behind us and even in front of us, that also has a shift with the colors of your RGB channel. From there, we are going to go back to the adjustment tab, and we are going to do something called color balance. Now this specifically deals with the shadows, the midtone, and the highlight regions. This is where we can start to give a little bit of a color shift. So as we begin with our midtone regions, and we can kind of shift our color. If we don't want that much red, we can put more cyan, and if we don't want that much green, we can put more magenta, and if we don't want that much yellow, we can put more blue in for every single channel. So I do the midtones first, then I go to the shadows, and then I go to the highlights. When I am satisfied, then I will click the X, and as you can see, before and after, we have a little bit of a color shift going on better. Now let's go back into our selective color region. So we're going to go to the adjustment icon and then back to selective color. And this area I can deal specifically with the colors. We could go from the yellow channel to the green channel, and we can slowly add and subtract different tonal values within each specific channel. I also like to do the neutrals, the whites, and the blacks too, because you will also have tonal shifts in your neutrals, your whites, and your blacks, also known as your shadows, your highlights, and your midtone regions. Anytime that you edit an Affinity Photo, or any photo editing program, you have a huge amount of being able to move your sliders before and after. As you can see, we are already starting to add more of that 3D effect and shifting our colors as such. So now we can go back to our adjustment panel, and now we can click our shadows and our highlight regions. Now we are going to be working specifically again with just our shadows and our highlights of our image. We can play with your sliders, move them side to side if you do not know what they do, so you can see the huge shift in what those sliders do. Remember, just a little bit works. As you can see before and after, we also see it moving up on our histogram. We're going to go back into our adjustment channel another time, and we are going to click on the HSL slider. This is going to specifically deal with your hue, your saturation, and your luminancy. Hence HSL is what it stands for. In this area, you have the ability to select specific colors like your yellows, your greens, and you can then make those yellows or their green tonal values to have more saturation or more luminance, or less saturation or less luminance. Or you can also adjust even your greens if you would like, or your yellows, your magentas in a different specific range. When you're done, as you can see before and after, we can start seeing how we're kind of editing and enhancing certain effects. If we notice that maybe it might be a little too much of a rich tonal value that we've shifted, or anything that's just too much of an edit, we can drop the opacity down on that specific edit that we have done. And let's say if we wanted to be able to specifically only have certain areas masked out, as you can see, we have a little bit, a few areas that I don't want in this particular region to actually be showing as much, because it adds a little bit too much of like a fringe where it sees that the color is starting not to balance right. So we can mask it. We can select our brush, and we can use, right now for our mask is white, so we're using a black brush to paint away and to hide certain areas. We are also going to add a vibrance layer in our adjustment category and add just a little bit of vibrance to this image. Now, I want to make a stamped layer of all the edits that I have done so far, so then I can specifically get into doing what's called dodging and burning, or a version of dodging and burning. So one of the ways that individuals, when you are editing in Affinity Photo or other editing programs, that you can do dodge and burn is you can end up creating a new layer and end up filling that layer with what's called 50% gray. So traditionally what you would think to do is put your slider to 50% opacity on your black or white, and it would give you 50% gray when you would fill that in. That is not the specific 50% gray that I am looking for. Yes, that is one way to do it, but all that's doing is just making that color only show up specifically on a image at 50% opacity. So what we are actually going to be doing is getting a gray value. Now, I do not need exactly 50% gray, but I just need to be able to get a gray that is in the middle of the road that I know is going to end up giving the effects of a 50% gray icon as I'm dodging and burning. So as I use the fill button, or the fill bucket, I can fill that new layer that we created with that specific color. Now I'm going to change that blend mode to soft light, and then I am going to take my paintbrush and I am going to switch my paintbrush to black, and now in the areas I will also adjust my opacity and my flow value. And in the areas that I want darker, I'm going to start to paint in. So essentially, I am selectively dodging and burning. Okay. Any areas that I do not want to be darker or enhanced with the shadow region, I can then switch my brush to white, and then I can paint in for the brightness areas. So just as curves adjustment layer and shadow highlight adjustment layer, and also color balance layers can adjust your highlights and your shadow region, we also can do selective dodging and burning, which will do the same thing. Any type of edits that we do is considered always manipulating our shadows, our midtone, and our highlight region. Just like when I take photographs as a photographer, I keep in mind all three of those regions. Okay. Now we are going to go back to our curves adjustment layer after we have done our dodging and burning, and now I'm going to add a little bit more of a 3D effect. As we do each of these layers, we can see that one layer upon another will build each other with everything. Now, we could just do a curves adjustment layer in the beginning and call it good and done. However, each thing that we put one on top of the other, the specific ones that we are using will add different effects at different times. Now I want to group everything together in the edit, so then I highlight everything, and then in a Windows computer I use Control G to group everything together. I rename the group Flower Edit. And as you can see, before and after, we have done a major shift, and this is how you can do different tonal edits with a color shifted photograph in Affinity Photo using multiple different types of adjustment layers.